that you can then work with them to improve the validity of those, especially in relation to science. And we say, well, it's not that the children have misconceptions, it's that they've built up valid understandings based on their experience, and we've now got to actually work with them, understanding where they are in their thinking, to help to improve it. But these, as I say, I think you've got some really exceptionally clear points that you could all bring in. And I will, as I say, I'll circulate to all of you some of these. On the one on globalization, I'll do this on the seniority, I'll put the one about the issue to do with the cultural diversity. Rita's one about that tension between a curriculum which is being imposed in relation to the Thai curriculum and examination system. I'll draw attention to that sense of the International Baccalaureate, because there's quite a lot of interest in the International Baccalaureate around the world, because it does build in inquiry learning, and that is for all the students. Now let's just check that I haven't missed any important cultural influence. I'll just go back into my emails and just see if there's any other that I can actually draw up. But just think now, from your own responses, have we missed any really important cultural influence? I mean, the one about, as I said, this one about seniority does seem to be very, very clear to you all. Just see if this is... It's Kanchana. Have we got that right? Kanchana? Is that right? Have I pronounced it right? Kanchana? Kanchana. Thank you. Kanchana. I've now got it. And you can also see how a little thing like your photographs would have helped me as teacher, you know, to connect with the names. I'll show you how they've done it in Ireland, and in future workshops you might think of that. that is very impressive, Kanchan. You know, I really like the way you went from the national policy, okay? So Kanchan has done something very clearly in this, explaining that you've got a national policy, which actually is wanting to make everyone a lifelong learner, to develop a Thai student to be a complete human being. So that's gone, I like the way you've gone from the national, you know, the sense of the cultural influence, through the Ministry of Education. So the Ministry of Education is trying to modify the behavior of Thai teachers from teacher center to student center. The third order into the university, education is innovation. The university is promoting and supporting teachers to use many different approaches and actually trying to move away from just the lecture. The fourth point, everybody is supporting. That's an interesting point, isn't it? They don't do it, yeah? So that they're really trying to help me to do it, but they're not doing it themselves. That is familiar to everybody, I think. And then the way you've moved to the students, and this is the most important. And we've said that the Thai students are shy, they fear, there is great respect, they're not confident. That's, again, it's so clear that you've explained that this is one of the central concerns, that they are passive learners. They don't ask the teacher when they don't understand, because they worry or think that they're a joker for their friend. There's something about, we call it the peer pressure. The peer pressure is getting in the way of the students becoming active learners. And that is a really excellent account. You've moved us from the major national issue, yeah, and the government is trying to do something, then into the ministry, then into your organization of the university. You brought us into the department, and then with the students. Now that is a really excellent ordering and structuring of your account. You see how that could provide the form for your action research account. You could actually say to your reader, I am going to consider first the national issues, then the ministry, then the university, the department, and then into the classroom with the student. And now I am going to show you what I am trying to do to fulfill those government policies, to actually meet with some of the tensions, but to live what my university is wanting as fully as possible. Are you okay with this? Because that would make a superb action research report. So I'll pause there because we've got just over a little time before the break. But I'll just continue a little bit further when we come back to make sure that anybody who wants then to modify, as you did with your action plans, to modify your understanding of cultural influence because of what you've shared together, can do so in your writing. Okay, so let's have a 15-minute break and then we'll continue. But as I say, again, an excellent. Thank you. Yeah. The hotel staff is saying there is a problem with it on this floor and they're trying to fix it, but it may be this afternoon. It may be a little early. Okay, so that's why we're not able to get on tonight. But what I'd like to do is to keep focusing on this issue of the influences that will really affect your action research. And I want to bring two new ones into the conversation that we haven't mentioned so far. We've really stressed, and here is another one, stressing that the culture, and the Thai culture gives precedent to seniority, okay, so yet another one. So you can be, I think, absolutely confident that you can make this point about Thai culture. It's giving preference to seniority, and that this is influencing the confidence, again, of students expressing and sharing opinions, even though the chance is there for them to discuss. So again, the fact that so many of you are recognizing this as a major issue means that you can actually put this into your action research account. Now, I want to show you how you can actually reference each other so that one of the ideas that has been expressed today in an email can actually be referenced in your account and given a proper reference in your paper. And this is important to start to reference each other in terms of your scholarship. Now, I'll just mention one other point that we haven't mentioned so far. I've got two that I want to focus on. But if you look at Pramuan's point here, now I haven't thought of this point, even though I know that parents are really important in terms of pupil learning. What goes on in families and how parents encourage their children makes a lot of difference to the pupils' accomplishments in schools. Now, it was this point about the Thai culture. It's definitely not encouraging. In fact, Pramuan is saying that pupils dare not ask questions or to make an argument, which actually is what inquiry learning rests on. Inquiry learning rests on these abilities to really ask questions and have confidence that you can engage in an open and honest argument. But look, what Pramuan is also saying is that the parents believe that the processes of learning, like the inquiry learning, can't help the children to pass entrance exam. That, if you like, it's only the traditional kind of learning where the students are listening and not questioning and not arguing that actually leads to success in the exams. Now, I know how important, and you do as well, family like the parents are in the learning of the children. So, what Pramuan is pointing to is the fact that the teachers in the schools might have to influence the parents to support inquiry learning for their children to be encouraged to do it. So you've got to bring in something that has not been brought in before, and that is the sense of the family, the parents, and getting the parents with the teachers to develop what it is that the ministry wants. Because that wonderful account we had before the break of going from the ministry, going from the government through the Ministry of Education to the university, department, classroom with the students. Now, we brought in something which, if you like, we shouldn't have ignored, because you all know that it's important, and that is the parents' relationship with their pupils and the school in terms of what is being learned and how it is being learned. So don't omit the significance of what the parents' attitudes are to the learning with their students. Okay? So that's one other addition, and this is how you can share your expertise. That you've brought into this room, through the emails you've sent, a whole range of cultural influences that you would not have been able to focus on your own. And this is one of the strengths, that I would say, of Thai culture, that you really do work cooperatively. And this ability of the email to share our ideas is actually getting over the problem that you all feel in Thai culture. And your students will feel it, the teachers in the schools, and that is to participate in the inquiry in this kind of group. But it's not only the teachers and the students that have been influenced by that, the Thai culture, that you don't question or argue with a teacher. That you are actually been expressing that. But the technology is helping us to overcome it. As I say, you know how you were feeling quite shy about coming to the microphone. Yet you've given one of the most important of responses by taking us into the government, the ministry, the university, the department, the class, and the students. Now that's great to be able to share in this way so that we can all learn from each other. Now, let me pause just to ask if there's anything that you would like to contribute, because I'm really pleased with the way the technology is now used, and hopefully we'll come back by this afternoon and we can continue to communicate like this. And I will be responding this evening to individual emails and any websites. For example, there is one at the moment that I haven't added to this, and we'll try to do that at lunchtime as long as the systems work. But is there anything that you're feeling that you would like to bring as an issue? Because tomorrow I've now got quite a lot that I can bring in to constructing the curriculum from your emails and the points that you've raised in your action plans, and also these cultural influences. So I'm really delighted that we can actually construct your own living curriculum tomorrow from what it is that you've already said. But I'm hoping if the email comes back, you'll be able to send any more ideas you want me to consider tomorrow. And now, before I do that, as I said, I just want to pause just to ask if there's anything that you want to bring to the group. And I know how difficult this is, but you're showing how good your ideas are when you email them in, and also with your websites. So let me just pause there before I go on to this final point I want to raise. And Chashri, just before coffee, asked me this question about the internal constraints. So we've been discussing the cultural issues, some of which offer possibility. The government, the ministry, the ranks at university, they're all trying to bring in inquiry learning, lifelong learning. Now these are possibilities, yet at the same time Thai culture is acting as a constraint on these because of this seniority issue, the passivity, the not questioning and arguing. So we've got those tensions which are actually in opposition. There's the government and the ministry, ranks at university, policy, departmental, and all supporting the inquiry learning, but you're in a culture that is actually in a tension with that. So there is a fundamental issue for us to look at tomorrow in terms of this living curriculum. Now those are external things. Now Chattery was quite right over coffee to ask me this question, and I just want to check if I've understood. As well as those external constraints, everybody in this room is probably experiencing internal constraints and opportunities. So, if we think now about your own perceptions of yourself in your context, how many of you are being constrained by internal controls that you have, if you like, we say, introjected from both parents and culture, so that they are now internal controls that you personally are working on from yourselves, from your own internal psychology? Because in my experience, it took me a long time to overcome similar kind of constraints that you feel. I was very shy at the age of 21 and 22. I could not do what I'm doing today. I could not stand in front of a group of people and actually talk and share ideas. My emotions, if you'd see me, you would see me shake, really shaking with nervousness and fear if I was in a group and I was wanting to speak but I couldn't. In my philosophy classes at the university, it took me 6 months before I made my first contribution. And I always remember because the topic it was on freedom, and I wanted that freedom to express myself, but I was so nervous that I hadn't for 6 months said anything. And the fear was really great. There was something about my desire to participate which gradually made me contribute. And when I did it, I was red, I was embarrassed, I really was shaking. But after I'd done it a couple of times, I began to feel confident that I didn't have to have everything well formulated and memorized before I spoke. What I found was that as I was speaking, I was actually making good sense. So if I felt I had something to explore and say, as long as I started to say it, I would be all right. Whereas before, I felt that I had to have everything memorized exactly as what I was going to say before I said it. Now, these were internal constraints. My embarrassment and fear, the vulnerability I experienced, were coming from internal constraints because my tutors were encouraging me to participate. Now, this is what I want to focus on just now about your own internal constraints. For example, about seniority. Now, from what you've been saying, I think you will recognize that you yourselves have internal constraints about speaking and arguing or questioning with somebody in your organization because of either their age or seniority. If you are going to develop the kind of inquiry learning we are talking about, you will need to overcome some of those internal constraints. Now, only you can do that. This won't come from any external source. Now, I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk again in your groups, and it can be just as pairs or threes or more than that, to think of some of those internal constraints. So when you feel that you're back in your workplace, imagine you're back in your workplace. Are you okay? Oh, that's great. So that's good. Oh, thank you. We will try and get into that. That's excellent. If you actually can recognize in yourselves some of these feelings of constraint, that is what I want you to talk about. You've been talking about external influences on you. And as I said, that was superb. The way you listed those, I was delighted with the 3 responses here. But I now want you to think internally about experiences that you have in your workplace where you know that you've got some of these constraints internalized. They're part of your internal psyche. Because unless we find ways of overcoming this, you will be reproducing this behavior for your students. Your students will see you behaving in a rather passive way to your seniors and not questioning and not arguing in a way that they will not think it is right to do with you. So can you, as I say, if we just take about 10 minutes, if you're in pairs, just give each other 5 minutes each. You know, try and allow each person the time to talk. That is why I sometimes ask you to work in pairs, because if there are 6 of you together, it means that somebody isn't getting as much time as somebody else. If you work in 2s or 3s, you can give each person quite an amount of time to explore something. So you choose together how you wish to do this, but I'm saying that you get more time for your individual reflections if you work in pairs. But I'm not insisting on that. As I say, work how you feel comfortable with. But the idea is to now personally think of experiences that you can share where you're aware of you operate internal constraints. The way in which the passivity, the way in which seniority is actually being lived by you can come out in some of experiences that you've been having in your workplace. Could I just ask, am I clear about what I would like you to do? If you are not clear, if you put your hands up, I will come and help. Okay, so we'll take about 10 minutes of this. After about 5 minutes, I'll just say about switching, just in case you are in pairs, to give each other the same time. Okay?
แล้วก็ขอให้ช่วยเราไปรอให้เราเนี่ยสามารถที่จะพูดได้อย่างผู้คนสนใจเราจะเสียงคนใช่นี่คือ constraint
เป็นว่าเป็น
internal constraint เป็นเรื่องของคือส่วนที่เราเนี่ยเรียกว่าโอเค
ในกลุ่ม
switch round with your pairs. Said I'd like you to finish your conversations. And this is part of you learning about the questioning and the argument. And it is part of the tension I feel with Thai culture. That you really are extremely polite and very courteous. Now, the difficulty is that might be getting in the way of that continuing conversation, because you immediately, as soon as I say something, you're giving me the respect that you say is from within Thai culture. You're showing how you are reproducing the Thai culture, because you're seeing me as that sense, I think, first of all, the older person, the person in the position of authority within here. And it is difficult, this, for you to see that you have the knowledge that is really important to bring into the public domain. So when I come to sit with you or share, I am not only an equal, you have the superior knowledge. It is your inquiries which really do need to be brought out. So, if you like, we're living some of the tension in the room today. and your internalization of your culture is both one of your greatest strengths with the cooperation and the working together, but it can also get in the way of the inquiry learning. So in a moment, I'm going to ask if some of you would please share, and you know you can either do this with the group, which I think is very good practice to get over this the shyness and that ability to really have inquiry going within a group like this. And I just want to just show you just one or two other things before I come in and ask you about some of those experiences of yours. Because your own internal constraints are helping to reproduce the very culture we're talking about. And we need to understand how to overcome some of the internal constraints. But let me just point to two other things I want to show you. And one of them is linked to Akarat. Is it Akarat? Akarat. Akarat. Is that? Akarat. Akarat. I want to show you the 2 points that Akarat has considered. Now, look again. The same thing in terms of the, I'll just make that just a little bigger. But just look at that first one, because that supports. Okay? Oh, yes. I don't know if I can just get through all that. I can't. I'll have to reduce it. Let's reduce it to 150. The same issue for Akarat that's come up time and time again is the respect for elders, people in higher positions, that is influencing the learning. Required to listen directly from teachers, not to question in class. After lunch, I want to show you how to reference this quote as an academic piece of writing, so that you could bring this into your work to actually support your own view about seniority in Thai culture. But look at the second one, which we haven't looked at. Now, you'll be able to tell me whether this is true. But I have no idea. You know, that Thai people believed in fortune telling, yes, and superstition. Now, from the laughter and the nodding, I see that you recognize this from within your culture. That it's saying most of Thai people grow up with hearing the superstitions. So it could be that Akarat is right, that the Thai students then get familiar with this way to get information or gain knowledge passively without thinking critically and scientifically. So again, it may well be that within your culture there is this influence of fortune telling and superstition, which you as educators will need to overcome through the critical thinking and the scientific inquiry as part of the constraints and difficulties you're facing coming from external cultural constraints. So that's a really good point that we hadn't brought in before. Do you see collaboratively how you are all adding something very significant? Now, I would not have even thought of this. And yet, clearly, you're all recognizing it as soon as it is actually mentioned. I hadn't realized when I went to Africa, in South Africa, in the KwaZulu-Natal, just how powerful the superstitions and the myths were within that culture. And it was interesting to me to see just how difficult it can be to bring scientific inquiry, critical thinking into a culture that actually has got myth, superstition and fortune telling at the heart of its culture. So that's, again, a really important point that you've brought in. And after lunch, I want to show how you can reference this from the workshop as an academic piece of reference. And the more that you can actually reference each other, in your work, the better. You may not think this at the moment, but the more as academics in Thailand, you can actually reference each other's work, the better it is to get these ideas made public in international arenas. Now, I just want to show you just one other thing that could be helpful to you with your students, and this comes out of Dublin City University. Again, it's the use of the technology. Remember, both Margaret Farron and Yvonne Grotti are co-chairs. They co-direct this Centre for E-Innovation, Pedagogy and Workplace Learning. And this is from Yvonne's 2012 group of master's students. Now, I've shown you how you can access Yvonne's and the other home pages. It's from my website, left-hand column. You go to the bottom, to the other home pages. Well, I just want to thank Pongton. Is that right, Pongton? Right, yeah. I just want to thank Pongton because Pongton has helped me to get access to the web. Okay, he's given me a wireless connection, which is different to the hotels, which is managed. So some of you may still, yes. Sorry?
The hotel Wi-Fi.
Yes. It's okay now. Oh, that's great. But thank you for getting me on Pongton. Now, if you go into my page, other home pages down here, this is what comes up, this page here. You go into Yvonne's website, Yvonne Grotti's website. Now, what I brought up with Yvonne's site is this. You go into her research and this supervision group for 2012. Now, what we've then got here is this picture. Now, this is what I think you might do with your students. And it might be that the Institute for the Promotion of Science and Technology, IPST, might do this with some of your action plans and pictures and your writings, because what Yvonne has done is to make available her students' work. Now, it could take, because it's a very large file, it could just take a minute or two to actually come through. But what Yvonne has done is to produce this booklet. Now, you can go on and you click on that. Now, as soon as you click on that, and there are 14 pages here, and it contains, like your action planners, there's an individual's abstract to their writing, another one, you can go through that, and it tells you about the individual, with all the pictures and the images. Now, you think how valuable I would have found it if I'd had all your pictures with your names, and then if I was to click on any of your images, you think as your dissertations and your writings are made available, you can actually access any of these by clicking on your image. Now, because of the size of some of these dissertations, they will take a little time to come through. But they're all available from those images. So it's only today when I have your name, do you see that I can actually connect and know who it is that I'm speaking to. So this is why I think your image, and think of your students, that you can take their image, put their name, and then share something about their action planning. You will find, I think, that it will stimulate the conversations together. But this is another use of the technology that you could actually all develop together, because you've all got your websites now, you've got each other's emails, so you can actually communicate. It might be that IPST could, if they had your pictures, put them all together in a collage or on 2 pages, your names, university, linked to your action plans. Now that would actually give us that sense of community that we're actually working together on these issues. But that, I just wanted to just show you what Yvonne had done. And you'll see that this will appeal to a number of you how can I improve my teaching of maths in the infant multi-grade classroom through the use of video and the local environment? So those people that have been interested in mathematics, you might find this one by Catherine Mulready an interesting dissertation to access. But I really wanted to show you the use of the technology of Yvonne's, because it just helps you to come to understand more about each other, as well as these issues that you've all been raising about, for example, the cultural issues. You can bring all of these into your account. But I wanted to show you what Yvonne has been doing in terms of the 2012 group, that she's put all of their images that you can access, and they're all freely available. Now, could I just now ask, in terms of your conversation earlier, if anybody has got something they might share with the whole group, and as you see, I keep doing this because I think if you feel that, as I used to feel, that nervousness and embarrassment, one of the ways you can overcome it is by saying, no, I'm actually going to do this. I'm actually going to speak to the group. And even though I'm feeling nervous, I'm going to do it. And once you've done it, I'll guarantee you feel better and you'll be able to do it again. So is there anybody that could just talk to us about some of those internal constraints that you are aware of? Not just the external ones, but you feel yourself is controlling some of your behavior. Is there anybody that could share any of those? Yes? Good. Professor Van Tieper is physically going to drag something to the microphone. Sorry. You might just check it's on, yes, you might speak into it. You might have to be close, I think. This one's on. You have to speak close to it.
My name is Surajit Sansawat from Content University. My internal influence, I know I have not enough some knowledge and concept, some topic for teaching and question, following prior knowledge to apply new knowledge. In context, subject, and I have high some topic I have high especially achievement. I think I will send work hard and test a lot.
Okay, now, what is courageous about what you've done is to overcome, with Professor Van Tieper's help, she physically moved the anxiety, okay? Now, internally, this is one of the most difficult things to overcome. So thank you. That was, the courage that is needed to do that is what you need to bring into your inquiry. So thank you very much for doing that. Is there anybody else that would just like to come and just share something, just internally, that you're feeling is actually reproducing what it is you want to overcome? Yes? Good.
We were talking about group. It's actually, for both of them, we have similar stories. They said they were starting out as a professor or teacher. teacher, they have to give a talk, a public speech for the first time. And they were nervous and anxious because they do not know what the audiences are going to be like, and they've never done it before with this, I think, Thai audience. So all they did was preparing for the talk so well, but they were still nervous and worried. But after they done it a few times, they got better and become more confident in that. So
That's good. Okay.
I
Now,
have a different story.
you have a different story. Right, please.
Actually, for me, I think it is a clash between internal and external influences. Because I can relate to Riga because I've been somewhere else for a long time, and I felt like I grew up elsewhere. And in my mind, I feel like I can speak up, I can express my opinion freely, and people around me will be more accepting and understand that, that was my opinion, and I wasn't being rude or anything. But when I got back, I felt like I had to be careful when I want to say something, especially, again, it ties to the scenery issue, that we were supposed to be respectful, not to just people, our senior, but also our friends as well. So sometimes I found myself not saying anything because I wasn't sure how I could say it or whether or not people are going to take it wrong way. So that's sort of what I'm struggling right now. So.
Yeah. I think thank you. That is the big tension. It's exactly that tension which helps, if you like, to reproduce the cultural constraints that you've got to actually get over to get inquiry learning going. Now, you've got at least two people in the room. Is it Vicky? Nikki and Rita, who've got a lot of experience across cultures. So they are both able to tell you about the tensions that they're feeling from coming from a culture where discussion, openness, argument is accepted and normal, coming into a Thai culture where they're feeling the pressure to conform to the very influences that you will need to overcome to get inquiry learning going with your students. Now, we can practice in this space that by doing what you've just done and what the speaker there for the first time has done, it is to show that courage that you can actually have your own voice. It can be heard and listened to without the fear of the superior, without fear and vulnerability that you will be made fun of or it is not expected. Now this is going to be very difficult for you to overcome. But you're going to have to show your students that it is okay. You're going to have to show your colleagues in particular, because I think you were saying that your colleagues were saying, it's okay for you to do this, well, they're not going to do it. Now, when you go back, and this is something we can talk about tomorrow, it is how might you spread the influence of this kind of openness where you can actually feel that you're being encouraged to give your opinion, to question. Okay, now, you might practice being critical of me. Now, there isn't one person in this room at the moment that has been critical of me. Now, I'm sure there must have been things that I have done that have not communicated well with you. I'm sure sometimes I might have violated some of your cultural sensitivities, but not one of you as actually being critical. And here's me saying, it will be only through you being critical that I will improve my own practice. So, unlike a superior that wants your silence and respect and being passive, I know that the only way I improve my practice is to learn through the criticism of the students that I'm with. Now, it's not being discourteous. It's not lacking respect for me. It's actually saying to me, look, I can offer you this understanding. It is a little critical of what you have been doing, but it might help you to improve your practice. Now, you want to think of this as an exercise for you to think of almost sending me an email that is critical of me. Practice it. Be genuine. If you think there is something that I could have improved over the workshops, you just think about what that might be. Send me a critical email. Genuinely practice it, because it is only through practice that you get the confidence to know that this is not only okay, but it's the only way you're going to encourage your students to develop inquiry learning, where the freedom to question, and it is this idea of being critical. So, as I say, not being disrespectful, it is being scholarly and academic, to learn together through criticism. Now, is there anybody else that might just be willing to share something, an experience internally, where they're feeling it as a constraint? They're feeling it is a problem that they will have to overcome to get inquiry learning going in their classrooms or with their colleagues. Is there anybody else who would like just to share? Yes, Professor Matthew.
May I share my idea because waiting for them. Really, I would like to talk every section. Just like this. My internal influence is just like this. I have believed in my career, I almost always, just like now, believe that my student can do everything that they would like to do. I really have my high expectation to my student. That is my internal belief. So when I, teach, my student, I will expect them to do for what I want them to do. At the beginning, I feel disappointed and feel uncomfortable. I studied in US for 7 years. The way they study over there is different from, study here. Because the student here just only listen to the instructor. But over there, the instructor listen to the student. Okay, so it's totally different. So when I came back and I tried to use, I think American style of teaching with my student, I feel, unhappy because they just keep quiet. If you ask them, they hardly, talk to you at all. So I changed my mind because I think that they have to have, finish in my course. So if they don't talk to me, I talk to them instead of waiting 3 minutes or 3 seconds, okay, to let them, participate with you. You have name list and you call their name, everyone. So just I start that, 2 or 3 times. For the first time, you don't have to use that list anymore. So they're going to, compete to show their hand. Because if the first hand, for the first minute, the question is, in a lower question, okay, lower thinking, okay, question. But if the more they learn to read, okay, the time pass, the question is going to be higher, higher, and higher, okay. So every time that I have done that, okay, I have to put my you know, to persuade them to participate with me. And after each section, I had to compare with my colleague. And my colleague said that, why do you have to put a lot of energy with them? If they don't want to participate, let them participate. It's their duty, it's their responsibility to come to the class. It's not your responsibility to open their mouth. If they want to open their mouth, let them do it by themselves. But I still have my internal influence that I want to make them to open their mouths in every hour. And I still have my own, you know, high expectation. And after I finish my 30 or 40 years of teaching, I think that, okay, my belief still be true. Because every one of my students, they finish with, you know, good degree, be accepted in the, you know, university community. When I met with the, you know, dean or the, you know, president, they would say that your department is very excellent because, you know, your student is the good. And I show them that the duty of or responsibility of the instructor is to drag the student capability out of themselves. You have to, you know, help them to show their ability, even though they're shy. But you have to make them, you know, show their capability. That is my belief until now. So sorry that I drag you to come and you know, still doing. But when he talk to me, you know, he can express himself. You know, he would like to talk just like that. But he is very polite to me very much, you know, that he comes. But if I am still be there, you know, teacher, okay, next time when you come, Dr. Whitehead, I guarantee he is the one who will come to the floor and talk to me.
Professor Van Tieper is really making the important points that I am trying to encourage you. Yeah? Because when you could not see Professor Van Tieper, but she physically, you know, pushed onto the microphone. Now, if Professor Van Tieper hadn't done that, then you would not have that experience of knowing that it is not too difficult. You feel nervous, but you've got to really develop this. And if you don't do it, I don't think you will get your students to do it. My 3-year-old, yes? Yes. You have to hold it closer.
There are 2 points I'd like to make. One, I'd like to respectfully disagree about this myth that Americans are always open about communication. I have personally worked with a professor, advisor, who you cannot get from her through speech, but you can always get from her through writing. So in some cases, writing communication could be effective too. And this depends on the context. So that's my first point. Point number 2, because of my family Chinese influence, and this is quite common in Thailand too, I don't know, some 30-40% of the families are Chinese influence. And in really traditional Chinese family, when we send out invitations, for example, to a wedding, in the really old days, we have to send out invitations 3 times. But request the present 3 times, so that they feel like they are really needed, they are probably respected. So this may be part of the reason why when you ask someone to come out, you wait a little longer and it takes a lot more encouragement before the people actually do.
Yeah. And could I just echo that the point about the American system? Now, you will find in any culture differences in ways of behaviour, because you've got to be careful not to make too many generalisations. This is why I've been careful in relation to my points about Thai culture, because you have been teaching me about Thai culture, and it was only when I saw the number of people that were telling me about the seniority and the way this influenced the